What's up, guys? I'm John Borba. I'm here with Brandon Hunt.
What's up?
We just watched the Season 7 finale of Walking Dead, and we are stoked, so we are going to talk all about it.
So spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it yet, or if you haven't caught up in the comics yet, too, we're going to talk about that, too.
So we are huge fans of the comics, and we saw a lot of elements that looked very familiar.
Yes.
Sasha looked a lot like Holly's death in the comics. However, there was a nice little turn on that, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it was great.
But probably the biggest moment in this episode for me was when the trash can folks, the Scavengers, turn against Rick's crew after they have a huge deal to help Negan, apparently, with another deal that was established.
Those jerks.
The Scavengers are not a group or faction that are in the comics.
Right.
And for me, personally, that was one of the things that I was most vested in, because I have no idea what they were going to do and how they would play into the situation. So it was really cool to see this different take on this really huge moment that pivots into the all-out war story arc from the comics. So where do you think they go with this? Like, specifically, where do you think immediately they're going to go with this with the season premiere?
Well, I think that obviously this is going to lead up to another big battle, right? Like at the very end of the episode, they said, hey, it's time for war. So maybe right at the get-go, I'm thinking we see just a huge clash, or at least a ramp up to a huge clash. And with the trash can people in the mix, it's kind of hard to tell what exactly is going to go down, because they're just a super new element to this whole thing that we haven't really seen in the comics before. So
now, for me, knowing the pacing of how they did this season, and that was one of the biggest issues with season 7 for me, is that they kind of took too much time to do too little things.
Yeah.
And I think that we're probably going to see some sort of progression for the Garbage Pail Kids, and we'll see a little bit of these two kind of preparing to have this big confrontation, hopefully for half a season and not a whole season. But I think in the long term, there are a lot of interesting things that this group could do. I think that's the most exciting part as a comic fan, is that so many of the elements in the season are shades or colors of things that we've seen from the comics, and this is something that's just completely unpredictable.
Right.
And Walking Dead as a show tends to be something that telegraphs a lot of things. For example, how many times are you going to allude to the fact that you're going to cut Rick's hand off? But this is something that nobody knows coming up. I think what they're probably going to do is, shortly after the all-out war storyline, there is a faction introduced called the Whisperers. They are a very distinct and interesting faction.
The Whisperers.
And they have a lot in common with Rick's current semi-buddies, which turned against them.
A lot. I think a lot in common. They have a lot of the same kind of talking cadences. They kind of have this sort of weird pack mentality that the Whisperers have. If you haven't read the comics, spoiler alert, also, the Whisperers, they wear zombie skins to blend in with zombie hordes as they walk around, and they have this sort of, well, like I said, pack mentality where it's almost like they're wolves a little bit, and they have like the strongest person as their leader. And we kind of see that in the trash can people with Jadis is her name.
Yep.
So I'm wondering if they're maybe a precursor to the Whisperers, or maybe they morph into the Whisperers at some point in the story, or
that's the part that's probably most interesting to me, is if they go in that direction. As a comic fan, you don't get to see the origins of this huge, powerful faction that has this isolationist mindset, much like the trash can people.
Right.
And to see this development of how that came to be, especially if it ties back into the Walking Dead lore and the big stuff that's going on right now in the show, that would be awesome. So those are some of the biggest things that we saw come out of this season of Walking Dead. Do you have any other big predictions?
I think season 8's premiere is going to be a huge whopper. So if you guys have any theories, let us know in the comments below.
And for everything else Walking Dead, stick with IGN.
Great White Buffalo.
Whisper.
Whisper.
Whisper.